as we start to set up data connections in our Power BI data flows. Take a moment to determine key information about these data sources, such as where the source resides and any pertinent login credentials. Depending on the answers to these questions, we may need to set up gateways in the Power BI cloud. For example, we need to set up gateways for connecting to SQL Server or an API query that requires login credentials. The good news is that if we create multiple queries to the same data source, we can reuse the data connection. For those of you already familiar with using the Power BI service, perhaps you've set up a gateway when sharing a dashboard in the cloud where it connects to a database. We start by installing the gateway directly in the Power BI service. Go to the top right menu in the black bar and in the settings select Manage Gateways from the menu. Here we see a message telling us that in order to leverage the gateway we need to actually install it first. To install the gateway, we can navigate to the top black bar, this time select Downloads, and we choose the Data Gateway option. This opens up a new web page specifically to download the gateway. Select the Download Gateway button from the middle of the screen. We now see a pop-up installer as the X at the bottom of the page. Click on it to run, select Next. We see in this cloud icon that guides us through the process of installing the gateway that we're presented with a choice of options between the on-premises and the personal mode. We want to choose the Microsoft recommended gateway rather than the personal gateway, which makes this gateway scalable across multiple users of the data flow. We can run this selection and we see this installs the gateway on our computer. We see that the process continues to guide us through the installation process. We provide a path for installing the gateway and accept the terms of use and conditions. And we select Install. Confirm to make changes to the computer. Once we've confirmed these permissions and the admin access, we see that we can use an email address to associate with the gateway. Also notice that the gateway installer does a good job of guiding us through the process. On this confirmation screen, we want to sign into the gateway with the Power BI email account. We now want to create a gateway name. I'm going to call this Power BI Dataflows Testing. We also want to add it to our gateway cluster depending on if we already have a gateway installed or if someone else in your department or group has one installed. We also see there's a space to enter the recovery key. We also want to set up a recovery key for our gateway. After you create this key, you want to store it in a safe place so that in case you need it again you have it on hand. I'm going to call this recovery key. Just going to give it a 8-character name. And select, or leave this unchecked, and I'm going to select Configure. Once the installation completes, we see a message indicating the gateway is ready to use, marked by the green check mark next to each application. Notice in dialog box it indicates that Power Apps and Power BI have working gateways. We see that we need to create the Azure gateway separately if this is something we need to do. We can then close the window to the on-premises gateway installation. Now when we navigate back to our Power BI service and refresh the page, we can now see the gateway details provided for the gateway we just installed. We're going to leave the description and the department information below blank. We do, however, want to check the boxes below this to apply to the gateway. We see a green checkmark at the top indicating that we are set to use the gateway. From here you can add the data connections to your Dataflow with the data gateway for the different data sources. You can see the hyperlink, Add Data Sources to use the gateway below, which is where you will add the individual data source details. We see on the administrator's screen we can add other users through their email addresses to administer the gateway. So we've set up an example of a Power BI gateway that we're going to use for other connections to data sources later. Organizing data source. The term Dataflow is a bit of a misnomer because it doesn't necessarily refer to a single ETL process for creating a data table. A Dataflow is really a folder that can contain multiple queries within it, whether they are entities, common data models, or from other Dataflows. You commission access to and refresh an entire Dataflow at the same time. I created a workspace called PBI Dataflows and Power BI that I want to use to create my Dataflow set. On the home page, let's select this workspace to enter into it. We see that in this workspace, we do not have any dashboard set up, and if we go into the Dataflow section, we do not have any Dataflow set up either. To add a new Dataflow to this workspace, we go to the Create menu at the top and select Dataflow. On the next page we see several options for creating a new query within this Dataflow, whether it's by defining new entities, linking entities from other Dataflows, importing a model, or attaching a common data model folder. Note that the option to link from other entities is a Power BI Premium specific capacity at the point when this course was filmed. Let's start by selecting Define New Entities and the Add New Entities option at the bottom. This takes us into the Power Query Online functionality. Now we select the source of our data. Let's just create a small data table where we manually enter our data by looking for the blank table option which we find near the bottom. Now, in the screen we can enter our values in Power Query Online manually. Let's create a single column in a table which I'm going to call Dataflow Types, and I'm going to enter entity, CDM, Dataflow, and model, and rename this table Dataflow Types. We select Next at the bottom of the screen. This takes us into the Query Editor window where we can see that there are further transformation functions available for this query. For now, let's just hit Save and Close at the bottom. In the next screen, it asks us to give a name to our Dataflow. We already named the query entity within the Dataflow. Now we want to name the entire Dataflow. I'm going to call this Testing Tables and leave the description area blank because we don't need to fill it out, then hit the Save. We now see our new data table in the Dataflow entity list. If we expand the arrows next to the name, we see the metadata for the fields within this connection, and we just have a string for a single field. From here we can add more entities to this Dataflow by selecting Add Entities from the top, for example. Now if we go back into our workspace and go to the Dataflow section, we see our new Dataflow called Testing Tables in the list. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You can find full tutorial of Power BI in the following videos. Keep watching.